My name is James, and I'm 31 years old. Trying to describe the emptiness in my marriage is difficult, but it has eaten away at me for months. When I look back now, it's clear that the absence of affection between Sarah, my wife, and me wasn't sudden. It crept up gradually until it became impossible to ignore. Sarah and I had been together for 7 years. We always had a solid relationship. At least, that's what I thought. We had our routines, our little rituals that gave our life a sense of wholeness. But lately, those moments of closeness had become scarce. We had only been intimate a few times in the past several months, and even then, it felt mechanical. The warmth, the passion that once defined our relationship had disappeared. Each time I tried to talk to Sarah about it, she brushed me off with a half-hearted explanation. "I've been tired," she would say, or "it's just stress from work." I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a growing distance between us, one that no amount of effort on my part could bridge. It wasn't just the physical side of things that bothered me. Our emotional connection seemed to be fraying, too. We used to talk about everything, our hopes, our dreams, even our fears. Now, our conversations felt shallow, like we were just going through the motions. I tried everything I could think of to reignite that spark between us. I planned surprise dates, cooked special dinners, and even tried to arrange weekends away. But every attempt fell flat. It was as if Sarah wasn't really there, even when she was sitting right next to me. One evening sticks out in my memory more than the others. I had gone all out, preparing Sarah's favorite meal, and setting the table with candles and soft music. I wanted to create an intimate, romantic atmosphere, hoping that it would remind us of better times. But when Sarah came home from work, she barely noticed. She ate quickly, muttering something about being tired, and then spent the rest of the evening glued to her phone on the couch. I tried to engage her, asking about her day, but she answered in short, distracted sentences, as if she couldn't wait for the conversation to end. That night, I lay in bed feeling more alone than I ever had. No matter how hard I tried to reach her, there seemed to be an invisible wall between us. As weeks turned into months, Sarah's excuses became more frequent. She was working late, meeting friends, or feeling too exhausted. I began to doubt myself. Was I being too needy? Was I expecting too much? But deep down, I knew that something was wrong. The moment that shattered my illusions came unexpectedly. I was cleaning up after dinner one night when I noticed something stuck in the couch cushions. It was a small scrap of pink fabric, something delicate and feminine. It wasn't mine, and it didn't seem like something Sarah would wear either. A cold sense of dread settled over me as I realized what it could mean. When I confronted Sarah about it, she laughed it off, saying it was from a new dress she had bought but hadn't worn yet. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, it continued to grow. Over the following days, I noticed more strange things. Sarah's phone was always on silent, and she seemed overly secretive about her messages. She was avoiding eye contact more often, and her explanations for her late nights felt increasingly flimsy. I tried to talk to her again, but each conversation ended with her brushing me off, accusing me of being paranoid. The emotional void between us was unbearable. It wasn't just about the lack of intimacy anymore. It was the growing sense of disconnection. I felt like I was losing her, and I couldn't understand why. One afternoon, as I was leaving for work, I noticed that Sarah's car was gone. It was strange because she usually worked from home in the afternoons. She hadn't mentioned any plans that would take her out, and my mind immediately jumped to the worst conclusions. I tried to push the thoughts aside and focus on my day, but the unease gnawed at me. When I got home that evening, Sarah was already there, but she seemed off. She was unusually quiet, her face drawn and tense. Her phone was face down on the table, and she avoided looking at me. When I asked her about her day, her answers were short and vague, as if she couldn't wait for the conversation to end. A few days later, desperation drove me to do something I never thought I would do. I went through her phone while she was in the shower. I knew it was a violation of trust, but I was at my breaking point. What I found confirmed my worst fears. There were text messages from someone named Tom. The messages were subtle, carefully worded, but their meaning was clear. They talked about meeting up, shared intimate jokes, and made plans for more. My heart sank as I scrolled through the messages. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. Sarah was having an affair. That night, I confronted her. I asked about Tom, trying to keep my voice calm, but the pain and anger I felt were overwhelming. She denied everything, claiming they were just friends, that I was blowing things out of proportion. But her denial rang hollow. I could see the guilt in her eyes, even if she refused to admit it. In the days that followed, I became obsessed with uncovering more. I started paying attention to her every move, her every excuse. She left the house more often, always with some vague explanation about errands or work. I could feel the distance between us growing, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't pull her back. Eventually, I knew that our marriage was over. The void between us had become too wide to cross. Sarah had betrayed me, and there was no going back from that. The life we had built together, the love we once shared, it was all gone, replaced by lies and betrayal. Now, I'm left to pick up the pieces. I had been living in a state of increasing emotional turmoil, consumed by the growing distance between my wife, Sarah, and me. For months, intimacy had vanished from our relationship, and I couldn't shake the suspicion that something was deeply wrong. Every attempt to rekindle our connection seemed futile, met with vague excuses like work stress or fatigue. The emotional void was expanding, making our once loving marriage feel cold and mechanical. Then one evening, as I was tidying up after dinner, I found a pink scrap of fabric lodged in the corner of the couch. It wasn't mine, and it didn't belong to Sarah either. Not the Sarah I knew. When I asked her about it, she casually dismissed it, claiming it was from a dress she'd bought but hadn't worn yet. The explanation felt hollow, but I desperately wanted to believe her. Even so, doubt had already set in. From that point on, I couldn't stop seeing the signs. Her phone always on silent, her sudden late-night outings, her growing emotional distance. It was like living with a stranger. In my growing anxiety, I took a desperate step. I went through her phone while she was in the shower. What I found sent shockwaves through my heart. Messages from a man named Tom filled her inbox. Cryptic but intimate exchanges about meetings, moments shared, and plans for more. I confronted Sarah that night, and she denied everything with a calmness that only deepened my suspicion. But the evidence was undeniable. Determined to get the full picture, I began tracking her movements more closely. I noticed she frequently left the house for extended periods, always with vague excuses about errands or work. One afternoon, I followed her to a local cafe where I saw her meet Tom for the first time. From my vantage point, I watched them laugh, touch, and share a kind of easy intimacy that had long since disappeared from our marriage. My heart broke as I snapped photos, documenting the betrayal in painful detail. Each picture was a reminder of what had been stolen from me. Back home, I sat with the weight of my discovery pressing down on me. I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. Instead, I gathered more evidence, each new detail a fresh wound. I followed her again on other days, watching her meet Tom at various places around town. Each time, I saw the same closeness, the same affection that once belonged to me. The pain was unbearable, but I needed to know the full truth. I dug deeper into Sarah's social media accounts, hoping to find more clues. What I found crushed me. Photos of her and Tom, together on outings, and even what appeared to be a weekend getaway, flooded her profile. Their smiles and easy companionship were captured in candid moments, evidence of a relationship far more intimate than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just a fling. It was something deeper, something that had replaced the love we once shared. I stared at the images in disbelief, feeling my world collapse. The realization that Sarah's affair was not just physical, but emotional was like a knife to my heart. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had found happiness elsewhere, and I was left with the remnants of a broken marriage. I sat in our living room that night, surrounded by the evidence of her infidelity. The photos, the messages, the notes I had taken during my investigations. The once comforting space now felt like a suffocating prison, filled with memories of love and trust that had been shattered. The confrontation I had been dreading for so long was now unavoidable. I knew I had to face Sarah with the truth, to hold her accountable for the pain she had caused me. I couldn't keep living in denial, pretending that everything was fine while I was drowning in a sea of emotional anguish. The evidence was there, staring back at me, demanding resolution. The day of the confrontation was filled with tension. I sat in the living room, waiting for Sarah to come home. The photos and messages were spread out on the table, a stark reminder of her betrayal. When she walked in, I barely recognized the woman I had once loved. The familiar warmth in her eyes had been replaced by a cold detachment. My heart pounded in my chest as I finally spoke the words I had been rehearsing in my mind for weeks. "I know about Tom," I said, my voice barely a whisper but filled with the weight of my pain. Sarah froze, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment, she tried to deny it, but the evidence was too overwhelming. I laid out everything I had discovered, the texts, the photos, the social media posts. Her facade crumbled as the reality of her betrayal was laid bare. The confrontation was as painful as I had feared. Sarah tried to explain, to justify her actions, but nothing she said could erase the hurt she had caused. I listened numb as she spoke of feeling neglected, of finding solace in Tom's company when our relationship had grown distant. But her words felt like empty excuses, unable to justify the devastation she had wrought on our marriage. In the end, there was no resolution that could heal the deep wound Sarah's affair had left. The love and trust that once defined our relationship were gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of betrayal and loss. As I sat alone in the aftermath of the confrontation, I realized that there was no going back. The woman I had loved and trusted had chosen to share her heart with someone else, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a shattered life. I knew the road ahead would be long and painful, but I also knew that I couldn't stay trapped in the wreckage of our relationship. It was time to begin the process of moving forward, no matter how difficult it would be. The moment had finally arrived, and I could no longer avoid it. As Sarah walked into the house, her face brightened with the usual smile she wore when she came home. But when she saw me sitting there, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, her smile quickly faltered. The silence that followed was suffocating, stretching out each second unbearably. I struggled to find my voice, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sarah," I began, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." Her expression shifted instantly from confusion to apprehension. She could sense the gravity of the situation before I even said another word. I gestured to the coffee table in front of me, where the photos and messages I had gathered lay spread out like damning evidence in a trial. "I know about Tom," I said, my voice betraying the emotions I had tried so hard to control. "I know about the affair." The color drained from her face as her eyes darted to the table, and she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "James, I don't," she began, her voice faltering. I interrupted. The surge of emotion I had been holding back finally breaking through. "Don't try to explain," I said, my voice rising. "I've seen everything. The messages, the photos, the places you've been. I know what's been happening." Her eyes filled with tears, and she took a shaky breath. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It got out of control." "Out of control?" I echoed, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "You're telling me this was some accident? That it wasn't a deliberate choice to betray me?" "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice breaking. "Tom and it was a mistake. It meant nothing." "Nothing?" I shouted, the anger I had been trying to hold back now boiling over. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, meeting him behind my back, and now you're telling me it meant nothing. Her tears flowed freely now, and she stepped closer to me, reaching out as if to comfort me. James, please, she pleaded. I know I've hurt you, and I don't know how to fix this. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to destroy our marriage. Destroy it. I nearly screamed, my voice thick with pain. You've done more than destroy it, Sarah. You've shattered it into pieces. I trusted you. I gave you everything, and you repaid that trust with lies and deceit. The depth of the pain was overwhelming. Every word she spoke was like another wound, cutting deeper into the already raw wound in my heart. For weeks, I had replayed memories of us together, trying to pinpoint where things had gone wrong, where the cracks had started. Now, the truth was out in the open, and it was far worse than anything I had imagined. The betrayal was not just physical, it was emotional. It was as if everything we had built together had been destroyed by her actions. Sarah stood there, her face crumpled with regret and guilt. I don't know what else to say, she said softly, her voice barely audible through her sobs. I know I've ruined everything, and I can't undo what's been done. No, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. You can't undo it. You can't take back the lies, the secrets, the hurt you've caused. What we had is gone, Sarah. It's gone because you chose to let it go. The room was heavy with the echoes of our argument. Every word spoken was a testament to the pain and betrayal we were both experiencing. Her attempts to explain, to apologize, felt hollow and insincere, like a weak attempt to repair something irreparably broken. The woman I had once loved and trusted now stood before me as a stranger, someone capable of deceit and betrayal that I could never have imagined. I need you to leave, I said finally, my voice cold and resolute. I need some space to process all of this. I need to figure out how to move forward without you. Sarah's face crumpled even more as she nodded, understanding the finality of my words. I'll leave, she said softly, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry, James. I never meant for any of this to happen. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the house. I was left alone, surrounded by the remnants of our shattered life. The silence that followed was deafening, a stark contrast to the intensity of our confrontation. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on me, and I felt an overwhelming sense of emptiness. The love and trust one had once felt for Sarah had been replaced by a deep sense of betrayal, and the future we had planned together now felt like a distant, unreachable dream. As the night wore on, I found myself sitting in the darkness, the evidence of her betrayal still scattered around me. The confrontation had been necessary, but it had left me feeling more lost and broken than ever before. The truth was out, but now I had to face the long and painful road ahead. The process of healing was just beginning, and it was a road I knew would be filled with heartache and struggle. The days that followed Sarah's departure were some of the hardest I had ever faced. The house, once filled with the warmth of our shared life, now felt cold and empty. Every corner seemed to echo with the memories of what had been lost, and each room was a painful reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my life. In the beginning, I moved through the days in a fog of numbness, going through the motions of daily life without really engaging with any of it. Work became my refuge, the one place where I could focus on something other than the relentless ache in my chest. I threw myself into my job, working long hours and taking on extra tasks in an attempt to keep my mind occupied. But the nights were different. The silence of the empty house was inescapable, and it was in those quiet moments that the full weight of Sarah's betrayal hit me the hardest. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of our life together and wondering how it had all fallen apart. I knew I needed help coping with the emotional fallout, so I sought out therapy. Talking to a professional felt like a necessary step toward healing. In those sessions, I allowed myself to express the anger, sadness, and confusion I had been bottling up inside. The therapist helped me navigate the labyrinth of my emotions and provided me with tools to start rebuilding my life. In the end, I realized that picking up the pieces wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it and move forward. The journey was filled with challenges, but it also offered opportunities for growth and self-discovery. I began to appreciate the strength I had within me, and I slowly started to embrace the possibility of a new beginning. The process of healing and rebuilding my life was a testament to my resilience and my commitment to finding happiness again. While the scars of betrayal would always remain, they had become a part of my story rather than the defining chapter. I was determined to create a future that was rich with possibility, one filled with new experiences and a renewed sense of hope. As I closed this painful chapter of my life, I felt a sense of renewal. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I faced it with a newfound strength and a deeper understanding of myself. The journey had been painful, but it had also been profoundly transformative. I was ready to embrace the future, with a heart that, though scarred, was still capable of healing and love.